This is a place I've been wanting to come here with this camera and this phone now to film and talk to. It's called Abbey Storey Graveyard. It's just outside Skibbereen town. It's an evocative, powerful, sad, harrowing, lonely place. What the camera is pointing at here is a place called the Pit, where approximately the figures of 9,000 to 10,000 people whose coffinless bodies were thrown into this pit during the worst period of the famine. And the famine genocide, as I call it, was at its worst here in Skibbereen, nearly more than anywhere else in the entire country. If you look closely at this patch of land, you can see furrows where large portions of it had been cut out to hold the bodies. If you think of your beloved ones, children, mothers, daughters, sons, and think of their faces, and now think of them going into here. It's a harrowing thing to have to do, but it's important to do it because in our history of the famine genocide, where a great hurt was done upon us, we have been almost programmed to forget. The depth of that damage on the national psyche still lingers here. This beautiful, simple, plain field marks a terrible and vicious, dark chapter when thousands of ships had been led out of the country filled with all varieties of food, yet we were sequestered onto one type of food, which was the potato, and which failed, and thus it destroyed approximately 2 million lives. Maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. No one knows the exact figures. You hear the passing of the traffic there, the busyness of people's lives. How much time do we take to remember that which we should not forget? This is the poem that was written, and I'll just read it to you. A million a decade of human wrecks, corpses lying in fever sheds, corpses huddled on foundering decks, and shroudless dead on their rocky beds, nerve and muscle and heart and brain, lost to Ireland, lost in vain. Pause, and you can almost hear the sounds echo down the ages, the creak of the burial cart, the rattle of the hinged coffin door, the sigh of spade on earth, now and again all day long. Here in humiliation and sorrow, not unmixed with indignation, one is driven to exclaim, "O God, that bread should be so dear, and human flesh so cheap." 1845 to 1850, to the nameless dead, victims of famine and fever who lie here in the Abbey and in other cemeteries and wayside graves. I find this concrete sign very moving, and there's an important mote in it. "O son, I loved my native land with energy and pride, till a blight came over all my crops, my sheep and cattle died. My rent and taxes were to pay, I could not them redeem, and that's the cruel reason why I left old Skibbereen. Happier were the victims of the sword than the victims of hunger who pined away, stricken by the want of the fruits of the field. Ireland's worst single disaster, the Great Famine, 1845 to 1850, resulted in the deaths of over 1 million of its people, with more than another million consigned to the immigrant ship. Skibbereen, epicentre of this horror, suffered more than most other places, and here, in the famine burial pits of the cemetery, the remains of 9,000 coffinless victims, a chilling reminder of man's inhumanity to man. Gonidiana dia trokra orthu. Man's inhumanity to man. Why was that put there? What inhumanity was put upon by men toward other men? Obviously, our colonial conquerors had made sure we could not recover. It was a genocide, and I use the words famine, genocide, together, for one informs the other. Those times have moved long past into memory, but the hurt is still there. The wounds are there. We carry this in a psyche and we can't even access it in ourselves. It's such a large traumatic damage to our nation that I feel it's never been fully alchemized or faced. I urge everybody who lives in Ireland to come here at least once. There are burial places like this all over the country, but there's something here that's so poignant. The sweet, beautiful green field, birdless right now, without any sort of sign of life other than the memory of what's happened. We can never forget. We should never forget. But how we act in life will be the form of true remembering. We must honour our lives in appreciation and gratitude of what we have today. And those that lead this country need to also remember where we've come from. And they should never ever take for granted their own citizens, what we had to come through, the horror in which all these generations crawled through. And we're here now, and these ancestors are the reason why we stand here today, that somehow survived, and somehow all of the peoples who were left to go to all over Ireland created other kingdoms, created other empires. But the memory never left them, and that line of hurt stretches across the planet. And for the tragedies of today in all parts of the world, we the Irish, who are so beloved in many ways, there's a reason why that is, because we have the darkness and the light in our hearts.